Have you ever felt overwhelmed by the constant pressure of modern life? The endless notifications, the demanding workloads, the feeling that you're always just one step away from burnout. It's a kind of battle we're all fighting every single day, a relentless siege on our peace of mind. And what's fascinating is that the most powerful defense against this chaos wasn't invented by a modern psychologist or a tech guru. It was forged thousands of years ago on ancient battlefields. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, who faced immense personal and political turmoil, wrote in his private journal, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That strength, that unshakable mental toughness, is what we're going to explore together, not through complex theories, but through the forgotten war strategies of ancient Stoic thinkers. What if the key to building a resilient mind in today's world lies not in a new app or a productivity hack, but in the time-tested principles devised by generals and philosophers for surviving the literal chaos of war? These were men who understood that the greatest battles are not fought with swords and shields, but within the mind itself. They developed a profound philosophy, Stoicism, not as a passive resignation to fate, but as an active, strategic approach to life's challenges. They built mental fortitude by preparing for adversity, controlling their perceptions, and turning obstacles into advantages, much like a skilled commander turning a defensive position into a platform for victory. In this video, we're going to journey back to uncover these powerful strategies. We'll explore how you can apply the Stoic general's mindset to protect your inner peace, how to use the practice of negative visualization to armor yourself against anxiety, and how to cultivate a calm clarity that allows you to make better decisions under pressure. This isn't about history for history's sake. It's about giving you practical, actionable tools derived from ancient wisdom to build an unshakable core of mental strength. So if you're ready to transform how you face stress, uncertainty, and challenge, you're in the right place. Let's begin. Ancient generals didn't just command armies, they mastered their minds first. Think about that for a moment. Before a single soldier was deployed, before any battle plan was drawn, the most critical preparation happened within the general's own thoughts. This is the very essence of the Stoic mindset, the understanding that outer success is impossible without inner stability. The Stoics, philosophers like Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus, referred to this as building your inner citadel. It's the idea that your mind is a fortress, and the strength of its walls determines whether external chaos, the setbacks, the criticisms, the unexpected events can breach your peace or simply bounce off harmlessly. Marcus Aurelius, who led the Roman Empire through war and plague, constantly reminded himself in his writings that the key to his effectiveness wasn't in controlling the world around him, but in fortifying the world within him. He wrote his most profound insights not for the public, but for his own private practice, his own mental drill. This parallels military strategy perfectly. A general knows that weather, enemy movements, and supply lines are often unpredictable. The only true variable they can control is their own judgment and reaction. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus, who was born into slavery and understood adversity intimately, put it perfectly: men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of them. You command your perceptions like a general commands troops. You decide where to focus your attention, how to interpret an event, and what meaning you assign to it. That is your sovereign territory. We see this principle in action throughout history. Consider the legendary grace under pressure of figures like George Washington during the brutal winter at Valley Forge, or the calm determination of Nelson Mandela during his long imprisonment. While not always explicitly Stoic, their actions embody this general's mindset. They couldn't control the freezing temperatures or the prison walls, but they exerted absolute authority over their inner response. They maintained their fortitude, their clarity, and their sense of purpose, which in turn inspired and steadied those around them. This isn't about suppressing emotion. It's about choosing a strategic response over a reactive one. It's the difference between a garrison that panics at the first sign of smoke and one that calmly assesses the threat and deploys its resources effectively. So where in your own life can you start applying this general's mindset to regain a sense of command? Is it during your morning commute when traffic sends your stress levels soaring? Is it in a difficult meeting where opinions clash, or perhaps it's in a personal relationship where emotions tend to run high? Identify that one area. Now, imagine approaching that situation not as a reactive participant, but as a strategic general surveying the field. What would change if your primary goal wasn't to control the other drivers, your colleagues, or your partner, but to master your own inner citadel? Your first command is to yourself. What if you could face any challenge without surprise or fear? Imagine walking into any situation, no matter how daunting, with a sense of calm preparedness, because you've already confronted the possibility of things going wrong in your mind. This isn't about pessimism. It's a powerful mental drill called Premeditatio Malorum, which translates to the premeditation of evils. It was a cornerstone practice for Stoic philosophers and ancient military strategists alike, a secret weapon for building profound resilience. While a general would fortify his inner citadel, he would also actively use this technique to map out every potential disaster on the battlefield. He wouldn't just hope for the best, he would visualize his supply lines being cut, his flanks being surrounded, a sudden storm rolling in. By doing this, he wasn't inviting disaster, he was disarming it. The shock and panic that cripple ordinary minds were eliminated because he had already walked through the scenario and devised a response. The element of surprise, a key weapon of any adversary, was utterly neutralized. The Stoic philosopher Seneca, a man who navigated the treacherous political landscape of ancient Rome, powerfully advocated for this practice. He wrote, "He robs present ills of their power who has perceived their coming beforehand." That's the entire goal right there, to rob adversity of its power to shock and destabilize you. When you mentally rehearse a potential setback, you are essentially vaccinating your mind against anxiety. The first time you think about a project failing or a difficult conversation turning sour, it might provoke a spike of fear. But by revisiting it calmly and rationally, you dilute that emotional charge. You move the event from the terrifying realm of the unknown into the manageable category of a contemplated possibility. You begin to see it not as a world-ending catastrophe, but as a solvable problem, an event you can navigate. We can see this strategic foresight clearly in history. Before a major campaign, a Roman general like Scipio Africanus wouldn't just dream of glorious victory. He would gather his officers and force them to brainstorm everything that could possibly go wrong. What if the local tribes they expected to be allies turned against them? What if the river they planned to cross was flooded? What if disease broke out in the camp? By rigorously asking these what-if questions, they developed contingency plans for each scenario. The battle plan wasn't a single path to victory. It was a flexible tree of decisions with branches for different outcomes. This meant that when something inevitably did go wrong, and it always does, the army wouldn't descend into chaos. The officers would simply recognize the situation and implement the plan they had already discussed. The fear of the unknown was replaced with the confidence of a prepared response. This ancient practice is incredibly relevant to our modern lives. Let's take a common source of anxiety, preparing for a crucial job interview, most people spend all their time mentally rehearsing their success, picturing the perfect answers and the handshake of an offer. But what happens when the first question is unexpectedly difficult? What if the interviewer seems dismissive or challenges your experience? Without any mental preparation for these obstacles, your confidence can shatter in an instant. Now apply Premeditatio Malorum. Spend 10 minutes before the interview calmly considering these potential challenges. Visualize yourself being asked a question you can't fully answer. See yourself pausing, taking a breath, and saying, "That's an excellent question. I don't have the full answer right now, but my approach would be to, by pre-living this minor failure, you transform it from a nightmare scenario into a manageable hiccup." You walk into that room not with a fragile hope that everything will be perfect, but with the robust confidence that you can handle imperfection. Take a moment to apply this to your own life right now. Bring to mind a current worry, a situation that's causing you some anxiety. It could be a financial concern, a health checkup, or a tense conversation you need to have. Now, instead of pushing the negative possibilities away, gently invite them in. Mentally rehearse the worst-case scenario playing out, but crucially, don't just stop at the disaster. Visualize yourself navigating it. How would you respond? What would your first practical step be? Who could you turn to for support? How would you begin to solve the problem? By doing this, you shift your role from a passive victim of circumstance to an active participant in your own life. You'll likely find that the sharp edges of your fear become duller, replaced by a quieter, more sturdy sense of readiness. The obstacle hasn't changed, but your perception of it and your preparedness for it have been utterly transformed. Ancient thinkers knew that unbridled desires lead to defeat, both in war and in life. This isn't just a philosophical idea. It was a foundational principle of survival and strategy. A general who desired a swift and easy victory, ignoring the reality of the enemy's strength or the terrain, would almost certainly lead his troops into a trap. He would waste precious resources, soldiers, supplies, morale chasing an outcome that was never within his direct control to guarantee. The Stoics, particularly the former slave-turned-philosopher Epictetus, took this military logic and applied it to the human psyche. They recognized that our suffering, our frustration, and our anxiety rarely come from the events themselves, but from our desperate attachment to desires that are ultimately outside our command. Epictetus drew a line in the sand that forever separates mental struggle from mental strength. He said, "Some things are within our power while others are not." Within our power are opinion, motivation, desire, aversion, and, in a word, whatever is of our own doing. Not within our power are our body, our property, our reputation, our status, and, in a word, whatever is not of our own doing. This distinction is the ultimate strategic filter. Imagine a military commander receiving a flood of intelligence reports. His job isn't to react to every single piece of data. His job is to sort it. Which reports detail enemy movements he can actually influence? Which ones are about factors like the weather that he must simply accept and plan around? A great general allocates his forces only to the fronts he can actually hold. He doesn't send cavalry to stop the rain. This is the discipline of desire. It's about conducting that same strategic sorting of your own mental and emotional energy. Your intentions, your efforts, your judgments, these are your cavalry. They are yours to command. The outcome of a project, the opinion of a critic, the past actions of others, these are the weather. You can prepare for them, you can adapt to them, but you cannot command them to change. Let's bring this into a modern context we can all relate to: career ambitions. You desire a promotion. That's a natural and healthy goal. The undisciplined approach, the one that leads to frustration, is to desire the promotion itself, the title, the salary, the recognition. But are those things entirely within your control? You cannot control if a company-wide hiring freeze is enacted. You cannot control if a more experienced external candidate applies. You cannot control whether your manager personally likes you. If you tie your happiness and self-worth to securing that specific outcome, you are setting yourself up for potential defeat. The Stoic, however, reframes the desire. They focus their energy solely on what is up to them, the quality of their work, their willingness to take on new responsibilities, their continuous learning, their professional attitude. They desire to be the most promotable version of themselves. This shift is profound. If the promotion comes, it is a welcome external event. If it doesn't, you haven't failed because your goal was to excel in your efforts, and you achieved that. You remained in command of your own forces. Now, it's your turn to apply this strategic filter. Take a moment and think about one persistent source of frustration in your life. What is the underlying desire there? Now, ruthlessly sort it using Epictetus's dichotomy. Draw that line. Which part of this desire is truly within your power? Your actions, your attitude, your preparation, and which part is not? The specific result, another person's reaction, the timing. Make a conscious choice right now to fully release your grip on the part that lies outside your command. Decide to reallocate all that wasted mental energy, the energy spent worrying, wishing, and wanting for the uncontrollable, and pour it entirely into the part you can influence. This single act of mental discipline is how you fortify your mind against the inevitable setbacks of life and begin to operate with the focused clarity of a strategist. In the chaos of battle, the greatest weapon was a calm mind. This wasn't just a poetic ideal, it was a tactical necessity. Amidst the clashing of swords, the cries of the wounded, and the fog of war, a leader's ability to remain internally still was the difference between a decisive victory and a catastrophic rout. The Stoics had a powerful word for this state, apatheia. Now, it's crucial to understand this term doesn't mean apathy or a lack of feeling, as we might interpret it today. It signifies a state of being undisturbed by the destructive whirlwind of passions, the blinding rage, the paralyzing fear, the desperate hope that clouds judgment. It is the cultivated ability to experience events without being emotionally hijacked by them, to maintain a sovereign clarity right in the eye of the storm. This equanimity is what allowed ancient commanders to process information clearly, assess threats accurately, and issue orders that were reasoned rather than reactive. Their inner calm became a force multiplier, radiating outward to steady the entire army. Marcus Aurelius, who spent much of his reign on military campaigns far from Rome, constantly practiced this mental discipline. He wrote a powerful reminder to himself in his meditations: receive without pride, let go without attachment. And elsewhere he advises, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. This is the essence of the warrior's equanimity. It's not about suppressing your reaction to an obstacle. It's about transforming your relationship with it entirely. You learn to see the obstacle not as a disturbance to your peace, but as the very material through which your peace is demonstrated and strengthened. A sudden problem isn't a reason to panic. It's simply the next piece of information to be coolly analyzed and addressed. This mindset turns every adversity into a training ground for your composure. History offers a profound example in the figure of Lucius Quinctius Cincinnatus. According to legend, in the 5th century BC, Rome was on the verge of catastrophe, its army surrounded by enemy forces. In this moment of extreme crisis, the Senate did not turn to a general already on the battlefield. They sought out a retired former consul who was quietly farming his small plot of land. They found Cincinnatus literally holding a plow, he was informed that he had been named dictator of Rome, invested with absolute power to save the Republic. Imagine the sheer weight of that moment. The fate of an entire civilization was suddenly placed on his shoulders. A less disciplined mind might have been crushed by the pressure or intoxicated by the sudden power. But Cincinnatus displayed perfect equanimity. He is said to have simply wiped the sweat and dirt from his brow, listened to the messengers, accepted the duty without fanfare, and immediately began formulating a plan. He raised an army, defeated the enemy within 16 days, and then, in a move that stunned the ancient world, immediately resigned his absolute power and returned to his plow. His calm acceptance and release of power were a masterclass in undisturbed judgment. Now, let's translate this ancient power into your modern life. You are almost certainly not facing an invading army, but you do face your own daily sieges. That moment when you're already late for an important meeting and you hit every single red light, the project deadline that gets moved up by 2 days without warning. The harsh, unfair criticism from a colleague. In these moments, your first instinct is likely a surge of frustration, anxiety, or anger. This is the emotional equivalent of an army breaking ranks and charging without orders. It feels powerful in the moment, but it almost always makes the situation worse. You arrive at your meeting flustered and irritable. You rush the project and make mistakes. You fire off an angry email you immediately regret. The warrior's equanimity offers a different path. It's the mental drill of taking that one breath before you react. It's acknowledging the obstacle, this traffic is frustrating, without becoming the frustration itself. It's accepting the new deadline as a simple fact of your new reality, not a personal injustice, and then calmly reallocating your resources to meet it. Think back to a situation from just the last day or two where you felt your equilibrium shatter. Maybe it was a spilled coffee, a difficult interaction, or a piece of bad news. Replay that moment in your mind. Notice the exact point where your calm was lost and reaction took over. Now, imagine an alternate reality. What if, in that very same moment, you had accessed the Stoic warrior's equanimity? What if you had greeted that event not with resistance but with a calm, almost detached acceptance? This has happened. Okay. What is the next rational step? How would the outcome have changed? You likely would have solved the problem more efficiently, communicated more effectively, and preserved your precious mental energy for the challenges that truly mattered. That space between the event and your response, that is your inner battlefield. And every time you choose calm over chaos, you aren't just solving a problem, you are winning a war for the command of your own mind. What if every setback was secretly a setup for a comeback? This isn't just wishful thinking or naive optimism. It is a core tactical maneuver in the Stoic playbook for mental resilience. The Stoics didn't believe in avoiding obstacles. They believed in alchemizing them, in turning the very thing that seemed to block your path into the foundation for your next step forward. Marcus Aurelius offered perhaps the most famous formulation of this principle, a line that has guided strategists for centuries: the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Read that again. What stands in the way becomes the way. This is a profound reframing of reality itself. An obstacle is no longer a stop sign, it is a redirect. It's not a reason to quit, it is the raw material for your ingenuity. This mindset transforms you from a passive traveler on a pre-built road into an active trailblazer, capable of building your own path with the rocks others would simply stumble over. We see this principle executed with breathtaking brilliance in military history. Consider the campaign of Hannibal Barca, the Carthaginian general who famously marched his army, including war elephants, across the Alps to invade Rome. The Alps were not a planned feature of his invasion route. They were a colossal, seemingly insurmountable obstacle. Every other general would have seen those mountains as an impenetrable wall, a reason to turn back or find a longer, easier route that would have cost him the element of surprise. But Hannibal did not see a barrier, he saw an advantage. He understood that the Romans would never expect an attack from the north through such treacherous terrain. The very thing that made the journey so deadly, the cold, the altitude, the narrow paths, also made it the perfect strategic choice. The obstacle of the mountain became his greatest tactical weapon, providing the surprise that led to his early victories. He used the difficulty of the path to his advantage, turning a defensive geographical nightmare into an offensive masterstroke. Now, let's bring this ancient genius into your modern world. Imagine facing a professional setback like an unexpected job loss. The immediate, natural reaction is often one of shock, fear, and a sense of failure. It feels like a door has been slammed shut. The Stoic, however, trained in the art of perceptual reframing, would immediately begin to ask a different set of questions. Instead of "why did this happen to me?" they ask, "how can this happen for me? This event has forced you out of a comfortable routine. What new door might that force open? Could this be the necessary push to finally pursue that freelance career you've always dreamed about? Does it provide the opportunity to retrain in a more fulfilling field? Perhaps it simply clears away a job that was no longer serving your growth, making space for something better. The obstacle of unemployment becomes the way to a more authentic career path. Or consider a more personal challenge, receiving harsh, perhaps even unfair, criticism. Our instinct is to become defensive, to retreat, or to lash out. We see the criticism as an attack on our worth, an obstacle to our social standing. But what if you could turn this obstacle into an advantage? What if you could sift through the emotional delivery to find any tiny nugget of useful truth? Even the most unfair critique can reveal how you are perceived by others, which is valuable information. This obstacle becomes the way to greater self-awareness and improved communication. It becomes a grinding stone to sharpen your character, teaching you humility, patience, and the strength to value your own self-assessment over the opinions of others. So take a moment right now to make this practical. Identify one single obstacle you're currently facing. It doesn't have to be a massive life crisis. It could be a delayed project, a strained relationship, a financial pinch. Now put on your Stoic strategist helmet. How can you apply the principle of what stands in the way becomes the way? Brainstorm 3 ways this problem could be leveraged. If your project is delayed, does that forced extra time allow you to improve the quality beyond what was initially possible? If a relationship is strained, does this obstacle become the way to practicing deeper listening and more honest communication? If money is tight, does this become the way to learning budgeting skills and differentiating between wants and needs? Your obstacle is not your enemy. It is your unwitting teacher, your unorthodox trainer, and your most unlikely ally. Your job is not to remove it, but to recruit it. Detachment isn't indifference, it's strategic clarity. Many people misunderstand this concept, thinking that to detach means to become cold, uncaring, or disconnected from life. But in the Stoic sense, and in the context of ancient strategy, detachment is something far more powerful and far more practical. It is the conscious act of creating a small space between you and an event, a space where you can observe what's happening without immediately being swept away by the emotional tide. It is the mental equivalent of a general climbing to a high ridge to survey the battlefield below. From that vantage point, he isn't indifferent to the fate of his soldiers. On the contrary, his care for them is precisely why he seeks that objective view. He knows that if he gets caught up in the dust and chaos of the front lines, his judgment will be clouded by the immediate fury of the fight. He might order a reckless charge out of anger or a panicked retreat out of fear. But from a place of detachment, he can see the entire field, the shifting enemy formations, the weak points in his own lines, the opportunities that are invisible from the ground. This cognitive distance is what allows for wise, effective decisions. The Stoic philosopher Seneca, a master of navigating the turbulent and often dangerous political world of ancient Rome, perfectly captured the value of this practice. He advised we should project our thoughts ahead of us at every turn and have in mind every possible eventuality instead of only the usual course of events. This is the essence of strategic detachment. It's not about not caring. It's about caring so much about getting the right outcome that you refuse to let your initial, raw feelings dictate your response. You project your mind ahead to the consequences of an impulsive action. You view the situation as if you were an advisor to yourself, offering clear-eyed counsel free from personal bias. This ability to step back from your own reactions is a superpower in a world that constantly pushes us to react immediately and emotionally. History provides a brilliant example of this principle in action with the figure of the Roman Emperor Augustus, the adopted son of Julius Caesar. After Caesar's assassination, Rome was thrown into a bloody civil war. Augustus, then known as Octavian, found himself in a fragile alliance with Mark Antony, a powerful but volatile general. Their relationship was fraught with tension, competition, and outright insults. At one point, Mark Antony penned a scathing and deeply personal public letter, attacking Octavian's character, his family, and his right to rule. The provocation was immense. The emotional, reactive response would have been to answer in kind, to escalate the conflict, to let pride dictate a course that would have certainly plunged Rome back into civil war. But Octavian exercised remarkable detachment. He didn't ignore the insult, but he refused to be emotionally entangled by it. Instead of responding with a similar emotional outburst, he had the letter read aloud to the Senate and then calmly, rationally, pointed out its factual inaccuracies and its reckless tone. He presented himself not as a wounded rival, but as a reasonable leader focused on the stability of the state. His detachment allowed him to turn a personal attack into a political victory, strengthening his position and preserving a fragile peace. He saw the bigger strategic picture because he wasn't blinded by the immediate emotional sting. Now, let's bring this ancient tool into your modern life. Think about the last time you had a heated argument with a partner, a family member, or a colleague. In the moment, the words exchanged likely felt like personal attacks. Your heart rate increased, your emotions flared, and you probably said things you later regretted. You were on the emotional battlefield, completely immersed in the dust and chaos. What would have happened if, in that very moment, you could have channeled the Stoic strategy of detachment? What if you could have mentally climbed to that high ridge? From there, you might have observed the situation differently. You might have seen that the other person's anger wasn't really about you, but was stemming from their own stress or insecurity. You might have recognized that your own reaction was being fueled by past grievances unrelated to this specific event. That cognitive space allows you to choose a response, perhaps pausing the conversation, asking a clarifying question, or simply refusing to escalate. That moves toward a resolution rather than deepening the conflict. Your challenge today is to practice this. Pick one situation where you know you are likely to have a strong emotional reaction. It might be when you read the news, when you get critical feedback at work, or when you're stuck in traffic. When that moment arrives and you feel that familiar surge of emotion, whether it's anger, anxiety, or frustration, your task is to simply notice it. Don't try to suppress it. Just acknowledge it. Say to yourself, I am feeling anger right now. Then take one deliberate breath and try to observe the situation as if you were a neutral third party. What would a wise, calm advisor tell you to do next? The goal isn't to become emotionless. The goal is to prevent the emotion from becoming the commander. By practicing this just once, you create a tiny foothold for a new way of being, one where you possess the strategic clarity to navigate life's battles not as a reactive soldier, but as a mindful general. Just as soldiers drilled daily to hone their reflexes for the chaos of battle, the Stoics engaged in a rigorous and consistent training of the mind, ensuring they were never caught off guard by life's inevitable adversities. This concept of constant mental preparation is what separates a philosophy that is merely studied from one that is truly lived. The Stoics didn't just wait for a crisis to strike and then hope to remember their principles. They built an unshakable foundation of resilience through daily, deliberate practice. They understood that mental toughness isn't a single grand gesture made in a moment of heroism, but the cumulative result of countless small, disciplined actions taken in times of peace. This daily drill was their way of fortifying the inner citadel so thoroughly that when the storms of life finally arrived, the walls would not just hold, they wouldn't even shudder. The philosopher Epictetus, who taught from a place of profound personal experience with hardship, placed immense emphasis on this idea of perpetual readiness. He argued that we must not be like sailors who are surprised by the first storm, but rather like those who expect rough seas as part of the journey. He offered this powerful guidance: no great thing is created suddenly, any more than a bunch of grapes or a fig. If you tell me that you desire a fig, I answer you that there must be time. Let it first blossom, then bear fruit, then ripen. Your mental resilience is that fig. It cannot be wished into existence on the day you need it most. It must be cultivated, tended to, and allowed to mature through daily, patient effort. The purpose of this preparation is to eliminate the element of surprise, which is the primary catalyst for panic. By pre-living potential challenges in the safe space of your own mind, you rob future calamities of their power to shock you into paralysis. You move from a state of reactive fear to one of proactive readiness. We know that ancient Stoics had specific routines designed for this very purpose. Many began their day not by checking a phone, but with a practice known as Premeditatio Malorum, the Premeditation of Evils, which we discussed earlier. They would sit in quiet contemplation and vividly imagine the challenges they might face that day: a difficult conversation, a project going awry, a personal slight. But crucially, they wouldn't just imagine the problem, they would visualize themselves navigating it with virtue, patience, and wisdom. This was a mental fire drill. Then, in the evening, they would perform a review known as an examination of conscience. They would reflect on the day that had passed, asking themselves pointed questions. Where did I succeed in living according to my principles? Where did I fall short? What could I do better tomorrow? This wasn't an exercise in self-flagellation. It was a strategic debrief, akin to a general reviewing the day's maneuvers to improve his tactics for the next engagement. The beautiful thing is that these ancient practices translate seamlessly into powerful modern habits. The morning meditation on potential challenges is the direct ancestor of what we might now call mindfulness or intentionality setting. Taking just 5 minutes in the morning to sit quietly, breathe, and mentally prepare for the day's demands can fundamentally shift your entire outlook. Instead of being ambushed by a stressful email, you've already created a mental space where you've anticipated potential frustrations and resolved to meet them with calm. The evening review is what we now recognize as journaling, writing down 3 things that went well and 1 thing you could improve upon. Isn't just a self-help trend. It's a 2,000-year-old Stoic technique for building self-awareness and continuous improvement. Other modern equivalents include daily exercise, which trains the body to endure discomfort and the mind to push through resistance, or the habit of reading philosophy or other wisdom literature each day to constantly reinforce a resilient mindset. Your challenge, should you choose to accept it, is to select just one of these mental preparation exercises and commit to practicing it for the next 7 days. It doesn't have to be grand or time-consuming. Perhaps it's that 5-minute morning meditation where you simply visualize yourself handling a known stressor with grace. Maybe it's keeping a small journal by your bed and writing one sentence about what you learned about yourself that day. It could even be as simple as using your commute to listen to a podcast that strengthens your mind instead of one that simply fills the silence. The specific practice matters less than the consistency of the effort. This is how you move Stoicism from an interesting idea in your head to a living, breathing strength in your bones. You are not just learning about resilience, you are building it one daily repetition at a time, forging an inner readiness that ensures no matter what the day brings, you will meet it not as a novice but as a trained professional of your own mind. What if your relentless pursuit of comfort is actually making you weaker, while a deliberate embrace of difficulty could be your greatest source of strength? This counterintuitive idea was a cornerstone of Stoic training, a form of mental and emotional immunization against the hardships of life. The Stoics understood a fundamental truth about human nature. A life dedicated solely to avoiding pain and seeking ease creates a fragile mind, one that is terrified of any disruption to its comfort. To build true resilience, they argued, you must voluntarily step into the very experiences you normally avoid. This is not about masochism or punishing yourself. It is a strategic form of self-conditioning. It's the psychological equivalent of a vaccine where you introduce a small, controlled amount of a pathogen to build immunity against a full-blown disease. By willingly facing manageable discomforts, you systematically desensitize yourself to the fear of adversity, proving to yourself again and again that you can not only survive difficulty but emerge from it stronger and more capable. This practice finds a perfect parallel in military training. Before a soldier is ever deployed to a combat zone, they are put through grueling exercises, sleep deprivation, long marches with heavy packs, exposure to extreme weather, and complex problem solving under intense pressure. The army doesn't do this to be cruel. They do it because they know that a soldier who has never been cold, tired, or stressed will break the moment they experience those conditions for real. The training field is a controlled environment where they can safely fail, learn, and adapt. The discomfort is voluntary and purposeful. It forges a familiar relationship with hardship, so that when genuine adversity strikes, the soldier's reaction is not blind panic but a calm, almost automatic, "I've been here before. I know what to do." The Stoics were applying this exact same principle to the battlefield of daily life. The Roman philosopher Seneca, a man who enjoyed immense wealth and privilege, was perhaps the most vocal proponent of this idea. He knew that luxury could be a trap, lulling the mind into a false sense of security. He advised periodically practicing poverty to appreciate what you have and to lose the fear of losing it. He wrote, "Set aside a certain number of days during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself the while, 'Is this the condition that I feared?'" This powerful exercise is about more than just building gratitude. It's a direct assault on anxiety itself. By voluntarily experiencing a scaled-down version of your worst-case scenario, you systematically dismantle its power to terrorize you. You answer the question, "What if I lose it all?" not with speculation but with experience. You learn that you can handle far more than you thought, and that realization is the bedrock of mental toughness. History is filled with powerful examples of this principle in action. The legendary Spartan warriors were renowned for their austere lifestyle, sleeping on thin reed mats, wearing a single cloak in all weather, and famously making their black broth from a base of blood and vinegar, a meal so unpalatable that other Greeks joked that it was no wonder Spartans were so willing to die in battle. This wasn't just cultural eccentricity. It was a systematic program of voluntary discomfort designed to produce soldiers utterly unfazed by the privations of campaign life. In a more philosophical vein, the Cynic philosopher Diogenes took this to an extreme, living in a tub and owning nothing but a cloak, a staff, and a wooden bowl. When he saw a child drinking water from his hands, he threw away his bowl, realizing he had created an unnecessary dependency. His goal was to achieve complete self-sufficiency and freedom by eliminating every possible desire for external comfort. The brilliant part is that you don't need to sell your possessions or move into a barrel to reap the benefits of this ancient wisdom. There are countless ways to incorporate voluntary discomfort into a modern life that is often overwhelmingly geared toward ease. It can be as simple as taking a cold shower for the first minute of your morning routine. That initial shock of cold is a masterclass in mental control. It's a small, daily victory over your instinct to seek comfort. It teaches you that you can choose a difficult action and remain perfectly calm on the other side. Other practices include walking instead of driving for short trips, fasting from social media or streaming services for a weekend, or taking on a challenging physical project like building a piece of furniture or learning a new skill that has a steep learning curve. Even something like having a difficult conversation you've been avoiding is a form of voluntary discomfort. You are choosing the short-term pain of an awkward talk to avoid the long-term, corrosive anxiety of letting an issue fester. Your mission this week is to consciously select one small, manageable form of voluntary discomfort and integrate it into your life. Don't start with a week-long fast or an ice bath. Begin with something simple but meaningful. Perhaps it's leaving your phone in another room for an evening to sit with your own thoughts, or choosing to drink only water for a day instead of coffee and soda. Maybe it's waking up 30 minutes earlier to read or meditate before the day begins. The specific action is less important than the intentionality behind it. As you do it, pay attention to the internal resistance that arises, the voice that says, "This is unnecessary, just go back to what's easy." Acknowledge that voice, thank it for its concern, and then gently proceed with your chosen task. This small act of defiance against your own comfort-seeking instincts is a direct workout for your resilience muscle. Each time you do it, you are sending a powerful message to your deepest self. I am not afraid of hardship. I am capable of more than I know. I am building a mind that cannot be broken by circumstance. Where are you right now wasting precious mental energy on things you are utterly powerless to change? This single question lies at the very heart of Stoic strategy, and it's a filter that can instantly transform your mental clarity and resilience. The ancient Stoics, particularly the philosopher Epictetus, developed a brilliantly simple but profound framework known as the Dichotomy of Control. It's the practice of meticulously sorting every single thing in your life into one of two buckets: those things that are within your power and those that are not. Your opinions, your judgments, your desires, your actions, these are yours to command. The weather, the past, the actions of other people, economic trends, these are not. This isn't just a philosophical idea, it was a fundamental principle of ancient warfare. A great general would never waste his limited troops, his supplies, or his time trying to control the weather or the terrain. He would accept those as fixed conditions of the battlefield and pour all of his resources into the one thing he could absolutely control: his own strategy and the actions of his army. He focused his energy on moving his troops effectively, on their training and morale, on his tactical decisions. To do otherwise would be a catastrophic misallocation of force, guaranteeing defeat before the first arrow was even fired. Epictetus, who began his life as a slave and understood powerlessness intimately, framed this distinction with unforgettable clarity. He wrote, "Some things are within our power, while others are not." Within our power are opinion, motivation, desire, aversion, and, in a word, whatever is of our own doing. Not within our power are our body, our property, our reputation, our status, and, in a word, whatever is not of our own doing. Read that list again. Our reputation, not in our power; our status, not in our power. These are granted or taken away by the opinions and actions of others. What is in our power is whether we choose to crave that status or fear that loss. This is the ultimate strategic pivot. You stop trying to command the ocean to be calm, and instead focus all your skill on learning how to sail your ship expertly in any weather. The storm is external, your seamanship is internal. That is your sole point of control. Let's make this practical with a modern example we can all relate to: the stock market or your personal investments. The daily fluctuations of the market are a perfect modern parallel to the unpredictable weather of an ancient battlefield. You can spend all day, every day, anxiously watching the numbers go up and down, refreshing your portfolio, reading endless analyses, and tying your emotional state to the green or red on a screen. This is the equivalent of a general shaking his fist at the sky, demanding the rain stop. It is a complete waste of mental energy on something you cannot control. The Stoic investor, however, applies the dichotomy. They recognize that the market's daily movements are not within their power. What is within their power? Their initial research before investing, their chosen strategy, whether it's long-term holding or something else, their decision to diversify, and their discipline to not make panic-driven buys or sells. They focus their energy exclusively on these controllable actions. They set their strategy based on what they can control, and then they detach from the daily noise, understanding that the outcome is not solely in their hands. This doesn't guarantee financial success, but it absolutely guarantees mental peace throughout the process. Now, bring this into your own life. I want you to take a moment and do a quick mental inventory. Think of 3 things that are currently causing you stress or anxiety. Got them? Now apply the Stoic filter. For each one, ask yourself, is this thing within my complete control? Let's say one of them is worrying about what a certain colleague thinks of you. Is their opinion under your control? No, it is not. Your attempts to manage their perception, your anxiety over their gossip, your frustration at their attitude, this is all energy poured directly into the bucket of things you cannot change. What is in your bucket? Your own professional conduct, your integrity, the quality of your work, your choice to treat them with respect regardless of their behavior. Your decision to value your own self-assessment over their opinion. By shifting your focus to this bucket, you haven't solved their attitude, but you have liberated a massive amount of mental energy that was being held hostage by a futile concern. Your reflective prompt for today is to make this tangible. I want you to literally write down 3 things you frequently worry about that, upon honest reflection, fall squarely into the category of things you cannot control. It could be the outcome of a specific project, the health of a loved one, the traffic on your commute, or the direction of national politics. Write them down. And then, next to that list, I want you to write a simple, powerful statement. I consciously release my need to control these things. I will redirect this energy to what I can influence. This act of writing an acknowledgement is not passive resignation. It is an active, strategic decision. It is you, the general of your own mind, making a conscious choice to stop sending troops to an unwinnable front and to redeploy them to where they can actually make a difference, on the battlefield of your own thoughts, your own actions, and your own choices. Ancient warriors lived with death in mind, not to fear it, but to value life more deeply. This profound practice, known as Memento Mori, which translates from Latin as "remember you must die," was not a morbid obsession for the Stoics and the great strategists of antiquity. Instead, it was the ultimate tool for creating clarity, purpose, and a fierce urgency to live well. They understood that keeping the finite nature of existence at the forefront of consciousness is the most powerful antidote to procrastination, trivial worries, and living on autopilot. When you genuinely internalize that your time is limited and could end at any moment, it acts as a filter, instantly separating what is truly important from what is merely noisy distraction. This awareness doesn't weaken mental resolve. It forges it in the fires of truth, giving you the courage to take action on the things that matter because you know there may not be a tomorrow to put them off until. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire while constantly surrounded by war and plague, regularly turned to this contemplation to ground himself and sharpen his focus. He wrote in his meditations, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." This wasn't a statement of despair, but one of immense empowerment. He is urging himself to use the awareness of life's fragility as a guiding principle for every present moment. If this were your last day, would you be arguing with that person? Would you be wasting hours on mindless entertainment? Would you be holding back from expressing love or gratitude? This practice forces a kind of radical honesty that cuts through the excuses and self-deceptions we comfortably build our lives around. It asks the most important question you can ever ask yourself: if not now, then when? History is filled with leaders and thinkers who used this principle to fuel bold action. The famous Roman general, when celebrating a triumphant return from war with a grand parade through the streets, would have a servant riding in the chariot behind him, whose sole job was to whisper in his ear, "Respice post te. Hominum te memento, look behind you, remember you are but a man." This was a deliberate, institutionalized practice of memento mori, designed to prevent the intoxication of success and fame from clouding the general's judgment. It reminded him of his humanity and his mortality, ensuring he remained humble and focused on his duties rather than his ego. In a more philosophical context, the Stoics were known to keep physical reminders like skulls on their writing desks or to reflect each evening that this day could have been their last, ensuring they lived it without regret. In our modern world, we go to great lengths to avoid thinking about death, to sanitize it and push it to the margins of our consciousness. Yet, in doing so, we inadvertently drain our lives of a crucial source of meaning and motivation. Think about the last time you received a real scare, a near miss in traffic, a health scare with a loved one. In the immediate aftermath, your priorities became crystal clear. The petty grievances and minor anxieties that occupied your mind just minutes before suddenly vanished, replaced by a profound gratitude for being alive and a sharp focus on what you truly value. Memento Mori is the practice of accessing that clarity without needing a crisis to trigger it. It's about using the certainty of death not as a threat, but as the most effective personal management tool ever devised. How can you apply this today? It doesn't require a skull on your desk. It can be as simple as pausing for 30 seconds each morning to acknowledge that today is a gift, not a guarantee. This simple act can transform how you approach your work, making you less likely to get bogged down in unproductive drama and more likely to focus on meaningful contributions. It can change how you interact with your family, making you more patient and present, because you are consciously aware that this moment with them is precious and non-renewable. Modern productivity experts talk about eating the frog, tackling your most important task first. Memento Mori is the deep why behind that advice. You do the most important thing first because you are deeply aware that you may not get another chance later. So I want you to take a moment for a powerful reflection. Ask yourself this question with genuine seriousness. If I knew with certainty that I had 1 year left to live, but I could change nothing about my physical circumstances or the public outcome, what would I do differently? Notice that the question isn't about achieving grand public legacies. It's about how you would choose to live your days. Would you work fewer hours? Would you call your parents more often? Would you finally start that creative project you've been putting off, not because you expect to finish it, but because the act of creating brings you joy? Would you worry less about what other people think? The gap between your answers to these questions and how you are actually living your life right now is the measure of where you're giving your time to things that do not truly align with your deepest values. This reflection is not meant to create panic, but to provide a profound and urgent clarity. Your time is your most non-renewable resource. The practice of Memento Mori is the wisdom to invest it not in the trivial, but in the essential. Mental strength isn't built in a single day of heroic effort. It's forged through daily habits, much like a blacksmith shapes a piece of steel. Each strike of the hammer may seem insignificant on its own, but with consistent, deliberate repetition, the cumulative effect transforms raw iron into an unbreakable blade. This was the Stoic understanding of character development. They knew that grand philosophical ideas were useless if they remained abstract concepts. To be truly resilient, those ideas had to be baked into the very fabric of daily life through routine and repetition. Your character, your resilience, your entire mindset is not a fixed entity but a living structure that is constantly being built or eroded by the small choices you make every single hour of every single day. The Stoics were masters of designing these small choices, these daily drills, to systematically reinforce a fortress-like mind. The Roman philosopher Seneca, a man deeply engaged in the hectic political life of his time, understood this better than most. He saw habit not as a minor detail, but as the primary architect of our lives. He wrote, "Every habit and capability is confirmed and grows in its corresponding actions. Walking is achieved by walking, running by running." Therefore, if you wish to develop a habit for something, do it. The profound simplicity of this insight cannot be overstated. You do not become a resilient person by simply reading about resilience. You become resilient by practicing resilience, by performing the small, corresponding actions that build that specific capability. Want to be less reactive? Practice pausing before you speak. Want to be more courageous? Practice doing one small thing that scares you each day. The habit itself is the practice, and the practice is what forges the result. Your character is quite literally the sum of your habits. We have detailed records of the specific habits Stoics like Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, and Epictetus incorporated into their lives. One of the most powerful was the nightly review. At the end of each day, they would engage in a practice of honest self-assessment. They would walk back through the events of the day, not to brood or regret, but to conduct a strategic debrief of their own performance. They asked themselves questions like, where did I let my emotions override my reason? When did I act in accordance with my virtues? Did I waste time on things outside of my control? This wasn't an exercise in self-criticism, it was a calibration. It was how they identified the tiny cracks in their mental armor so they could repair them the next day, preventing those small weaknesses from becoming major failures under real pressure. Another common habit was morning meditation or Premeditatio Malorum, where they would mentally prepare for the day's challenges by visualizing potential obstacles and rehearsing their virtuous responses. This combination of morning preparation and evening reflection created a continuous feedback loop for personal growth. The brilliant news is that you don't need to be a Roman philosopher to benefit from this ancient wisdom. These practices have direct and powerful modern equivalents. The Stoic nightly review is what we now call journaling, taking just 5 minutes before bed to write down what went well, what you learned, and what you might do differently tomorrow accomplishes the exact same goal. It turns experience into wisdom. Their morning meditation on challenges is mirrored in modern mindfulness apps that guide you through setting intentions for the day. The Stoic value of physical endurance finds its parallel in a consistent exercise routine, whether it's weight training, running, or yoga, where you literally practice overcoming resistance and discomfort on a daily basis. Even the simple habit of reading a few pages of philosophy or inspiring literature each morning is a way of feeding your mind with resilient thoughts before the world has a chance to feed it with anxiety. The key is consistency, not intensity. A 1-minute breathing exercise done every day is infinitely more powerful for building mental toughness than a 2-hour meditation session you do once and then abandon. Your opportunity for growth lies in making this personal and practical. Look at your current daily routine. What small, consistent habits are already shaping your mind? Are they habits of resilience like a daily walk, a gratitude practice, or a technology curfew? Or are they habits of fragility, like scrolling through social media first thing in the morning, complaining with colleagues, or ruminating on past mistakes? You don't need to overhaul your entire life today. The Stoic way is to start with one single, manageable habit. Identify one tiny action that aligns with the mental toughness you want to cultivate. Maybe it's making your bed each morning as a small, immediate victory and a practice in completing a task. Perhaps it's writing down one thing you're grateful for each night before you sleep, training your mind to spot the good. It could be committing to a 5-minute daily walk without your phone, allowing for a moment of solitude and reflection. Choose one thing that feels almost too small to fail. Then focus all your energy not on the outcome, but on the unbroken repetition of the practice. Each time you perform that small habit, you are not just making your bed or writing a sentence, you are casting a vote for the type of person you are becoming. You are the blacksmith, and with every consistent strike, you are forging yourself into something stronger. What if you could not just accept your fate, but love it? This is the profound and radical invitation of the Stoic concept known as Amor Fati, a Latin phrase that translates to a love of one's fate. It goes far beyond mere tolerance or grudging acceptance of life's inevitable twists and turns. Amor Fati is the active, enthusiastic embrace of every single event that occurs in your life, the good, the bad, the triumphant, and the tragic, not as random misfortunes or lucky breaks, but as essential, necessary ingredients for your development. It is the mindset of looking at every experience, especially the difficult ones, and saying, "This too is for me. This is part of my story, and I would not have it any other way." This isn't about being passive or resigning yourself to circumstance. It is the ultimate act of mental alchemy, where you transform the base metal of hardship into the gold of wisdom and strength. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, who faced more than his share of personal loss, betrayal, and the immense burden of leadership, wrote powerfully about this willing acceptance. He stated, "A blazing fire makes flame and brightness out of everything that is thrown into it." This is the perfect metaphor for Amor Fati. The practiced Stoic mind becomes that blazing fire. It does not discriminate between what is thrown into it, a perfect piece of wood or a lump of garbage. It uses everything as fuel. The event itself is neutral. It is your perception, your decision to love it and use it, that generates the flame and brightness of growth. The German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, though not a Stoic, later captured this spirit perfectly when he wrote, "My formula for greatness in a human being is Amor Fati, that one wants nothing to be different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity. Not merely bear what is necessary, still less conceal it, but love it." This is the complete and total endorsement of your own life, exactly as it has unfolded. We can see this principle in action in the lives of countless historical figures who turned catastrophic failure into legendary comeback. Consider the story of Thomas Edison. In 1914, a massive fire broke out at his laboratory in West Orange, New Jersey, destroying years of priceless research and prototypes. The damage was estimated in the millions of dollars, and much of his life's work was literally going up in flames. Watching the inferno, Edison's 24-year-old son Charles was frantic, fearing his father would be shattered. But Edison himself was remarkably calm. He famously turned to Charles and said, "Go get your mother and all her friends. They'll never see a fire like this again." Later, he reflected, "There is great value in disaster. All our mistakes are burned up. Thank God we can start anew." This is Amor Fati in its purest form. Edison didn't just accept the disaster, he immediately looked for the value within it. The fire was not an end. It was a brutal, unexpected, and necessary cleansing that allowed him to rebuild from a cleaner slate. He loved his fate enough to see the opportunity buried within the ashes. Now, bring this transformative idea into your own life. Think of a personal loss, an unexpected change, or a failure that you have struggled to come to terms with. Perhaps it was a relationship that ended painfully, a job you were counting on that fell through, or a financial setback. For years, you may have carried this event as a weight, a source of resentment or regret, a chapter of your story you wish you could tear out. Amor Fati asks you to do the opposite, to not only stop fighting that chapter, but to learn to love it for what it taught you. That heartbreaking breakup forced you to rediscover your own independence and strength. That lost job pushed you to develop new skills and eventually find a career path that was far more aligned with who you are. That financial hardship taught you resourcefulness and the true difference between wants and needs. The event itself was neutral. The meaning and strength you derived from it came from your eventual embrace of it. Your challenge is to actively practice this reframing right now. Cast your mind back and select one past event that you have historically viewed as a negative, a mistake, a loss, a rejection. Now, I want you to engage in a deliberate act of mental storytelling. Write down 3 specific ways that event, as difficult as it was, ultimately served you. How did it make you stronger, wiser, or more compassionate? What door closed so that a better one could open? What illusion did it shatter that needed to be broken? This is not about pretending the pain wasn't real. It is about honoring the pain by recognizing it as your teacher. When you can look at that past event and genuinely feel a sense of gratitude for the person it forced you to become, you have not just accepted your fate, you have learned to love it. You have taken full command of your entire history, and in doing so, you have unlocked a profound and unshakable source of resilience for whatever comes next. How can you strengthen your mind if you don't know where it's weak? This simple, piercing question gets to the very core of Stoic strategy. Ancient generals didn't just march into battle blindly. After every engagement, they would conduct a thorough after-action review. They would analyze what tactics worked, where their lines broke, and how the enemy exploited their vulnerabilities. This wasn't an exercise in self-criticism. It was a strategic necessity for survival and improvement. The Stoics applied this exact same military principle to the inner battlefield of the mind. They understood that building mental fortitude isn't about building a perfect wall overnight. It's about constantly identifying the cracks and repairing them before the next assault. This practice of rigorous, honest self-examination was their daily maintenance program for the inner citadel, ensuring it remained strong against the sieges of life. The Roman philosopher Seneca, a master of navigating the complex and often treacherous political landscape of his time, was a fervent advocate for this practice. He wrote in his letters, "I will keep constant watch over myself, and each day I will retrace my steps." That phrase, "retrace my steps," is so powerful. It's the image of a commander walking back across the field after the battle is over, looking for clues, for missed opportunities, for points of failure. Seneca continues, "Why do I do this? To see if any of my actions during the day were driven by impulse rather than principle." His goal wasn't to achieve a state of flawless perfection, but to achieve a state of flawless awareness. He knew that the enemy of a strong mind isn't the occasional failure, it's the unawareness of that failure, allowing the same weakness to be exploited again and again. This daily audit was how he held himself accountable, not to some external judge, but to his own chosen standards of virtue and reason. We know that Stoics like Seneca and Marcus Aurelius had a specific ritual for this, often performed in the evening. It was called the examination of conscience. The process was methodical. They would retreat to a quiet space and mentally review the day from start to finish, almost like watching a film of their own behavior. But they weren't watching for entertainment, they were watching for learning. They asked themselves pointed questions. When did I lose my temper today? Was it necessary? Did I act with justice in that meeting? Did I waste time on frivolous distractions? Did I complain about something I cannot change? Crucially, the purpose wasn't to wallow in guilt. It was to conduct a calm, dispassionate analysis. It was a data-gathering mission on the self. For every misstep identified, the next question was always, what virtue could I have called upon instead? How can I do better tomorrow? This turned every failure into a lesson plan and every success into a reinforced strength. This ancient practice of the evening review is perhaps one of the most accessible and impactful Stoic habits you can adopt today, and it has a direct parallel in modern therapeutic and personal development practices. The Stoic examination of conscience is the philosophical ancestor of journaling. When you spend just 5 minutes at the end of the day writing down your reflections, you are engaging in the same process of externalizing your thoughts to examine them more clearly. Modern cognitive behavioral therapy is built on this very idea, that by identifying our automatic negative thoughts and examining the evidence for and against them, we can change our emotional responses. The Stoics were doing a form of CBT on themselves 2,000 years ago. Even the simple act of talking through your day with a trusted friend or partner can serve this function, so long as the goal is understanding and growth rather than just venting or seeking validation. So let's make this practical right now. You don't need a special journal or a quill pen to begin this practice tonight. Think back over the last 24 hours. Can you identify one specific moment where your reaction to an event was less than ideal? Perhaps it was a flash of irritation at a slow-moving driver, a moment of anxiety before a presentation, or a sharp word spoken to a loved one when you were tired. Replay that moment in your mind. Now, instead of judging yourself, simply get curious. Ask yourself the Stoic questions. What was the underlying trigger? Was my reaction proportional to the event? What belief was driving that reaction? Perhaps a belief that things should always go smoothly, or that others should never inconvenience me. What would a more virtuous response have looked like? Calm patience, courageous composure. This isn't about creating a ledger of faults. It's about gathering intelligence. Each moment of honest self-assessment is another brick mortared into the wall of your mental fortress, making it stronger and more resilient for whatever tomorrow brings. In siege warfare, patience often won more battles than brute force. Imagine a massive army surrounding a fortified city, its walls towering and seemingly impregnable. The impulsive commander, driven by ego and a desire for quick glory, might order a full-scale assault immediately. The result would be catastrophic: a bloody repulsion, lost soldiers, and a demoralized army. The wise general, however, understood the profound strategic power of patience. He would settle in for a long siege. He would build earthworks, cut off supply lines, and wait. He knew that time itself was a weapon. Inside the city, food would dwindle, morale would fracture, and internal strife would grow. The victory, when it finally came, would be achieved with minimal loss of his own forces. This wasn't a passive waiting. It was an active, disciplined endurance, a masterful use of timing and pressure. The Stoics saw this military virtue as absolutely essential for navigating the sieges of our own daily lives. The Stoic philosophers elevated patience from a simple personal trait to a core component of strategic wisdom. They recognized that impulsive action, driven by raw emotion or a desperate desire for immediate resolution, almost always leads to worse outcomes. Patience was the mental discipline that allowed them to withhold their energy until the right moment, to endure discomfort without complaint, and to trust in a process larger than their immediate desires. Marcus Aurelius, constantly managing military campaigns and political crises, had to cultivate this virtue daily. He wrote in his Meditations, "And thou wilt give thyself relief, if thou dost every act of thy life as if it were the last, laying aside all carelessness and passionate aversion from the commands of reason." This might sound like a call to urgency, but its deeper meaning is about patience. He is urging himself to act with meticulous care and reason right now, in this moment, rather than being impatient for some future result. By focusing on the quality of the present action, the next brick laid in the wall, he could endure the long, slow process of building something lasting without giving in to frustration. We can see this principle play out with stunning clarity in the history of the American Revolutionary War. General George Washington's campaign against the British was not a story of constant glorious victories. In fact, he lost more battles than he won. His greatest strategic weapon was not tactical brilliance on the open field, but an almost superhuman patience and endurance. After being driven out of New York, his army battered and demoralized, he chose not to make a desperate last-ditch stand. Instead, he practiced a strategic retreat. He preserved his forces, he waited, and he endured the brutal winter at Valley Forge. While his army suffered immensely, that period of waiting was not wasted time. It was a time of retraining, regrouping, and building resilience. His patience allowed the strategic situation to evolve. French support materialized, British public support for the war waned, and his own army grew tougher. His endurance turned a ragged group of volunteers into a professional fighting force capable of winning the final victory at Yorktown. The war was won not in a single dramatic charge, but through years of steadfast patience. Now, translate this ancient strategic endurance into your own modern world. Consider your career growth. The impulsive approach is to jump from job to job every year, chasing a slightly higher salary, or to become deeply frustrated if you don't receive a promotion within your own imagined timeline. This is the equivalent of that general constantly bashing his army against the city walls. The Stoic, patient approach is different. It's to understand that a truly meaningful career is built like a siege. It requires consistently showing up with integrity, mastering your craft one skill at a time, building genuine relationships, and adding value where you are. The promotion, the recognition, the larger salary, these are the city gates swinging open. They are the natural result of a long, disciplined application of pressure and quality work, not the result of a frantic assault. Impatience makes you vulnerable to bad decisions. Patience allows your compound interest of skill and reputation to grow. This applies with equal force to building deep relationships. You cannot force intimacy, trust, or love. These are the fruits of a patient and enduring investment of time, consistent kindness, and shared experiences. Trying to rush a relationship or becoming frustrated when it doesn't progress on your schedule is like trying to storm a fortress with a ladder. It might feel like action, but it's ultimately futile and damaging. True connection, like a successful siege, requires the patience to let walls come down naturally through the steady pressure of your authentic and reliable presence. Take a moment to look at your own life through this lens of strategic patience. Identify one single area where you have been feeling frustrated, impulsive, or desperate for a quick resolution. Is it in a slow-moving project at work? Is it in a personal goal like getting in shape or learning a new language where progress feels invisible day to day? Or perhaps it's in a relationship that requires more time and understanding than you've been willing to give. Now, reframe your view of this situation. See yourself not as a frustrated attacker, but as a wise general conducting a siege. Your weapons are not force and urgency, but consistency, endurance, and trust in the process. What is one small, patient action you can take today that contributes to the long-term strategy instead of demanding an immediate result? Perhaps it's doing one more repetition at the gym without expecting to see a change in the mirror tomorrow. Maybe it's having a single, calm conversation to build a bridge in a relationship without expecting it to be completely mended in one night. By choosing patient endurance over impulsive action, you aren't being passive. You are deploying the most powerful and strategic force at your disposal, time itself. Retreat isn't defeat, it's a repositioning for greater strength. This might sound counterintuitive in a culture that prizes constant forward motion and glorifies pushing through at all costs. But the Stoics and the greatest military commanders in history understood that a tactical withdrawal is often the most intelligent and courageous move you can make. It takes far more wisdom and discipline to know when to yield than to blindly charge ahead into a hopeless fight. A strategic retreat is not about running away from a challenge, it is about running toward a better position. It's the conscious choice to conserve your most vital resources, your mental clarity, your emotional energy, your physical well-being, so that you can live to fight another day on terms that actually favor you. This is the art of choosing your battles, and it is a supreme expression of self-command. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus, who deeply understood the limits of control, offered brilliant guidance on this very idea. He advised, if you try to act beyond your powers, you will not only fail to achieve anything, but you will suffer needlessly and make yourself miserable in the process. This is the core of the strategic retreat. It is the recognition that you are not all-powerful, that some fronts are simply not winnable with the forces you currently have at your disposal. To continue throwing your energy at an immovable object is not perseverance. It is a form of self-inflicted violence. The wise person, like the wise general, knows the precise moment to disengage, to pull back, to regroup. This act of yielding is not a surrender of your principles. It is a strategic realignment of your efforts to better serve your ultimate goals. You are not giving up the war, you are simply refusing to be destroyed in a single, pointless skirmish. One of the most famous examples of this principle in military history is the epic retreat of the 10,000, as chronicled by the ancient Greek historian Xenophon. This was a force of Greek mercenaries hired by a Persian prince to help seize the throne. Deep in the heart of the Persian Empire, their employer was killed in battle, and the Greek generals were treacherously murdered by the enemy. The army was stranded, leaderless, and surrounded by hostile forces thousands of miles from home. The immediate emotional reaction would have been panic, despair, or a suicidal last stand. Instead, the soldiers elected new leaders, including Xenophon himself, and made the astonishing decision to not fight their way out, but to walk their way out. They executed a fighting retreat, not toward the enemy, but toward the sea and safety. They chose to yield the immediate battlefield in order to win the larger campaign for their very survival. This masterful retreat, one of the most celebrated in history, required immense discipline, unity, and the suppression of ego. It was a testament to the idea that sometimes the most direct path to victory is to turn away from the fight. Now let's bring this powerful ancient strategy into the battles of your modern life. How often do you find yourself in a situation where you are emotionally, mentally, or physically exhausted, yet you feel compelled to keep pushing simply because quitting feels like failure? Perhaps it's a project at work that is clearly failing, but into which you've sunk so much time that you can't bear to stop. Maybe it's an argument with a loved one that has spiraled into a circular, destructive pattern where no one is listening anymore. Or it could be the relentless pressure you put on yourself to maintain a certain pace, never taking a real break until you are hovering on the edge of burnout. In all these cases, the instinct is to dig in your heels and push harder. The Stoic strategy of the tactical retreat offers a different path. It gives you permission to consciously and deliberately step back. A strategic retreat in your life could look like taking a genuine mental health day where you completely disconnect from work emails and responsibilities, not as an act of laziness, but as an act of strategic resource conservation. It could mean agreeing to pause a heated argument with your partner, saying, "I love you too much to keep arguing like this. Can we take an hour to cool down and then talk calmly?" This is not losing the argument, it is winning the relationship. It could look like withdrawing from a social commitment you made out of obligation because you recognize that your energy reserves are depleted and you need solitude to recharge. In a broader sense, it might even mean taking a temporary step back from a long-term goal to re-evaluate your strategy. Perhaps you've been trying to force a career path that isn't aligning with your strengths. A strategic retreat would be to pause, maybe even take a less demanding job for a while, to gain perspective, retrain, and eventually re-engage with a better plan and renewed vigor. So where in your life right now might a strategic retreat be the wisest and strongest choice? Is there a battle you are fighting that is draining your resources for little to no gain? Is there a front where you are acting beyond your powers, as Epictetus warned, and needlessly making yourself miserable? Identify that area. Now, give yourself full permission to consider a tactical withdrawal. What would it look like to consciously and without self-judgment take one step back? It doesn't mean you're abandoning the field forever. It means you are smart enough to know that to advance tomorrow, you must sometimes regroup today. By choosing to retreat, you are not admitting defeat. You are repositioning yourself for a far greater and more meaningful strength. A rigid strategy fails where a flexible mind succeeds. This is a fundamental truth on the ancient battlefield and in the chaos of modern life. Think of a mighty oak tree and a reed in a storm. The oak, strong and rigid, may stand firm against a gentle breeze, but a powerful hurricane will snap its trunk and tear it from the earth. The reed, however, is flexible. It bends and sways with the wind, yielding to forces far greater than itself, and when the storm has passed, it springs back upright, unharmed and ready for the next challenge. The Stoics aim to cultivate the mind of that reed, not weak or wishy-washy, but supremely adaptable, able to bend without breaking under the immense pressure of a changing world. Their core principles were the deep, unshakable roots. Their mental flexibility was the strong, supple stem that allowed them to survive any storm. The Stoic philosophers understood that the universe is in a constant state of flux. Nothing remains the same, and to expect it to is a recipe for misery and defeat. They practiced adaptability not as a betrayal of their values, but as the highest expression of them. A general who stubbornly sticks to his original battle plan after the enemy has completely changed tactics is not principled. He is a fool who will get his men killed. The principled general is the one who holds fast to his ultimate objective, victory and the preservation of his troops, but remains wildly flexible in his methods to achieve it. He is ready to pivot, to flank, to retreat, or to advance based on the real-time conditions of the battlefield. In the same way, the Stoic holds fast to their ultimate objective, living with virtue and reason, but remains completely open-minded about the path to get there. Their principles are their compass, not their chain. Seneca, who served as an advisor to the unpredictable Emperor Nero, knew the value of this intellectual versatility firsthand. He wrote, "The mind must be given relaxation. It will rise improved and sharper after a good break, just as rich fields must not be forced, for they will quickly lose their fertility if never given a rest, so constant work will break the power of the mind." This is a profound insight into flexibility. He isn't just talking about taking a vacation. He's advocating for a mental posture that knows when to apply pressure and when to yield. Forcing a solution when you're stuck is like forcing a field to produce. It leads to burnout and barrenness. The flexible mind knows when to step back, to change perspective, to let the problem rest, and to approach it from a new angle later. This ability to shift modes from intense focus to relaxed receptivity is a critical form of adaptability. We see this principle embodied in some of history's most effective leaders. Consider the Roman Emperor Augustus, the great-nephew and adopted son of Julius Caesar. Where Caesar was assassinated for his perceived ambition and inflexibility, Augustus learned a different lesson. After avenging Caesar's death, he found himself in a fragile alliance with Mark Antony. For years, they ruled together in an uneasy truce, but eventually, their relationship fractured into open war. Augustus could have pursued a rigid, head-on confrontation. Instead, he demonstrated incredible strategic flexibility. He used propaganda, political maneuvering, and strategic marriages to isolate Antony and his ally, Cleopatra. He positioned himself not as a power-hungry dictator, but as the restorer of the Roman Republic and its traditional values. When the final naval battle at Actium came, his forces were not necessarily the strongest, but they were the most agile and well-supplied. He won not through brute force, but through adaptable strategy, and then, in his greatest act of flexibility, he did not cling to the title of dictator. He restored the Republic while quietly retaining ultimate power, adapting the old system to create a new, stable form of government that brought peace to Rome for centuries. He held to his principle of stability and order, but his methods were endlessly adaptable. Now, bring this ancient skill into your 21st century life. The modern world demands mental flexibility more than ever. Consider the need for a career pivot. The industry you trained for might be disappearing due to automation or economic shifts. The rigid strategy is to double down, to keep sending out resumes for a job that no longer exists, to see yourself only as that one title. This leads to frustration, financial hardship, and a crushing sense of failure. The flexible Stoic approach is to see your core principles not as your job title, but as your transferable skills, your work ethic, your problem-solving ability, your capacity to learn. It's to pivot. The accountant might learn data science. The factory worker might train in renewable technology. The flexible mind asks, what new value can I create with my existing strengths in this new landscape? They don't see change as a threat to their identity, but as an opportunity to apply their virtues in a new context. This applies with equal force to our daily problem solving. How often do you find yourself stuck on a problem at work or in a personal project, banging your head against the same wall, trying the same ineffective solution over and over again? This is rigidity. The flexible mind, trained in Stoic thought, would instead pause and ask a different set of questions. What is the true objective here? Is my current method serving that objective? What is one assumption I am making that might be completely wrong? What if I tried the exact opposite approach? This willingness to abandon a failing plan, to experiment, and to embrace a little creative chaos is the hallmark of mental agility. It's not about giving up, it's about upgrading your strategy. So I want you to take a moment for a quick audit of your own mental flexibility. Cast your mind over the last week and identify one situation where you felt stuck, frustrated, or met with unexpected resistance. It could be a repeated argument with a family member that always follows the same script, a recurring problem in a workflow that you keep patching rather than solving, or a personal goal you're failing to meet with your current methods. Now put on your Stoic strategist helmet. How could you apply the principle of the reed in this situation? What would it look like to bend instead of break? Could you change your approach to the argument, perhaps by listening instead of talking, or by asking a question instead of making a point? Could you scrap your entire workflow and design a new one from scratch? Could you break your big goal into such a small, absurdly easy first step that it becomes impossible to resist? Your flexibility is your greatest source of strength in an unpredictable world. It is the tool that allows you to remain steadfast in your character while being utterly adaptable in your methods. In the silence, the greatest strategies are born. This isn't just a poetic notion. It was a non-negotiable element of the Stoics' daily regimen, a deliberate retreat from the noise of the world to hear the one voice that truly matters, the voice of their own reasoned judgment. The ancient Stoics understood that constant exposure to external stimulation, the opinions of others, the demands of society, the endless chatter of public life acted like a fog, clouding their ability to see things clearly and make decisions aligned with their deepest values. Solitude was their method for burning off that fog. It was not an act of antisocial withdrawal, but a strategic recalibration, a way to return to the world with a sharpened mind and a renewed sense of purpose, much like a general retiring to his command tent to study the battle maps away from the din of the camp. Marcus Aurelius, despite bearing the unimaginable weight of leading the entire Roman Empire, fiercely protected moments of complete isolation. He wrote in his private meditations, "People seek retreats for themselves in the country, by the sea, or in the mountains, but this is altogether unphilosophical when you can at any moment retreat into yourself." For him, the most important retreat was not a physical location, though those could help. It was an internal one. He recognized that true solitude is a state of mind, a practiced ability to disconnect from the external circus and connect with the inner citadel of your own consciousness. This is where he found the clarity to untangle complex political problems, the strength to endure personal betrayals, and the patience to govern with wisdom instead of impulse. His solitude was his strategic command center. History offers countless examples of leaders who used deliberate isolation as a tool for monumental decision-making. Consider the young Mohandas Gandhi, a figure who later embodied Stoic-like principles. As a lawyer in South Africa, facing the brutal reality of racial discrimination, he didn't immediately launch a public campaign. He withdrew. He spent 24 days on a train, traveling across the country, and then long periods in quiet reflection. It was in this intense solitude that he formulated the core principles of satyagraha, his philosophy of non-violent resistance, which would eventually change the world. He used the silence not to escape the problem, but to devise the most powerful strategy to confront it. Similarly, the great inventors and artists throughout history, from Nikola Tesla to Julia Margaret Cameron, understood that their most groundbreaking ideas would never emerge from a place of constant distraction. They required the fertile ground of uninterrupted, solitary thought. The modern equivalent of this ancient practice is what we might now call a digital detox or a dedicated mindfulness practice. Our world is exponentially noisier than ancient Rome. We carry a Pandora's box of distractions in our pockets, each notification a tiny dagger of interruption aimed at our focus. The Stoic practice of solitude today means consciously creating tech-free zones in your day. It could be the first 20 minutes of the morning where you do not look at your phone, instead opting to sit with a cup of tea and your own thoughts. It might be a weekly solitude walk in a park without headphones, allowing your mind to wander and process the week's events instead of being fed more information. The practice of meditation is perhaps the most direct parallel, sitting in silence, not to achieve a blank mind, but to observe the chaos of your thoughts without getting swept away by it, training the muscle of your attention to obey you, not your triggers. Your challenge is to actively recruit this ancient power into your own life, starting today. You don't need a remote cabin in the woods. You need only a few minutes of intentional silence. I want you to literally schedule it right now, as you would any other important appointment. Block out just 5 minutes on your calendar today for a session of strategic solitude. When that time comes, go to a room and close the door or step outside away from others. Leave your phone behind for those 5 minutes. Just be. You don't need to force any profound thoughts. Simply listen. You might be astonished at what rises to the surface. A solution to a problem you've been wrestling with, a moment of gratitude you'd overlooked, or simply a sense of calm you didn't realize you were missing. This is not wasted time, it is invested time. It is the daily maintenance required for the most important instrument you possess, your own mind. How would this challenge look from a year from now, or even 10 years from now? That simple question is one of the most powerful tools in the Stoic toolkit for mental resilience, a deliberate technique for shifting your vantage point to see the true scale of your problems. The Stoics called this taking the view from above, and it was their secret weapon for cutting through the fog of immediate, overwhelming emotion. When you're stuck in the middle of a crisis, it consumes your entire field of vision. It feels permanent and all-important. But by mentally projecting yourself into the future and looking back, you activate a kind of emotional time travel. You see the present moment for what it truly is. A single point on a long timeline, a temporary event, not your entire story. This practice doesn't make the problem disappear, but it radically alters its emotional weight, draining the panic and urgency and leaving behind a calmer, clearer space for rational action. The philosopher Epictetus, who taught that our judgments about events are the source of our suffering, provided the perfect guidance for this. He advised, when you are troubled about anything, you have forgotten this, that all things happen according to the universal nature, and that this individual wrong which you suffer is nothing to you. The phrase nothing to you sounds jarring at first, but he doesn't mean it's unimportant. He means that in the vast, sweeping scope of the universe and your own long life, this single event does not have the power to define you or destroy you unless you grant it that power. He is urging us to view our troubles from the highest possible vantage point, from the perspective of universal nature itself, where our individual struggles are seen in their true, manageable proportion. This isn't about diminishing your experience, it's about empowering you to handle it with grace and strength. We can find a profound historical example of this in the life of the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius during the Antonine Plague. This was a devastating pandemic that swept across the empire, killing millions of people, including many of his closest friends and advisors. The pressure on him was unimaginable, facing a biological disaster with no modern medicine, while also managing wars on the frontiers and the stability of the entire Roman world. It would have been easy for him to descend into despair, to see each day's death toll as an insurmountable catastrophe, but his personal writings reveal his use of this precise Stoic technique. He constantly reminded himself to zoom out. He would reflect on the vastness of time, considering how many empires and plagues had come and gone before him. He considered the scale of the cosmos, recognizing his own life as a tiny, fleeting moment. This perspective didn't make him callous to the suffering. It gave him the emotional stability to endure it without breaking. It allowed him to make clear-headed decisions about quarantines, economic relief, and military deployments because he was not paralyzed by the immediate horror. He saw the plague as a tragic chapter, not the entire book of his reign or his life. Now, bring this astronomical perspective down to the human level of your own modern anxieties. Imagine you're about to give a major presentation at work and you're consumed by a fear of public speaking. Your heart is racing, your palms are sweating, and the fear feels absolutely enormous. Now activate the view from above. Fast forward 1 year. Will you even remember this specific presentation? Probably not. Will it have any meaningful impact on your career trajectory? Unlikely. The people in the audience will have forgotten it by lunchtime. This doesn't mean the presentation is pointless, but it instantly deflates the balloon of anxiety around it. It allows you to recategorize the event from a life or death scenario to what it really is, a professional task, one of hundreds you will perform this year. The same technique applies to a painful conflict. You have a bitter argument with a family member and the anger feels all-consuming. Now, zoom out. See this argument from the perspective of your entire lifelong relationship with this person. Does this single disagreement erase decades of love and shared history? From that higher vantage point, it appears as a small, dark cloud passing over a much larger landscape. It becomes something you can navigate and move past, rather than a relationship-ending event. Your turn to apply this transformative lens. I want you to bring to mind one current worry that feels heavy and immediate. It could be a financial concern, a professional setback, or a personal rejection. Now, I want you to consciously and deliberately engage in this Stoic time travel. First, project yourself 1 month into the future and look back at this problem. How does it look from there? Now, go further. Project yourself 1 year into the future. How significant does this event seem from that point? Finally, take the ultimate view from above. Imagine yourself at the end of your life, looking back over the entire tapestry of your experiences. From that final, wise perspective, how important is this current worry? What advice would that future, older version of you give to the you of right now? This exercise is not designed to make you feel that your problems are trivial. It is designed to give you back a sense of scale and control. It reminds you that you are not your present moment crisis. You are the entire story, and this is just a single sentence. By regularly practicing this shift in perspective, you build a resilient mind that can withstand any storm, because it knows that every storm, without exception, eventually passes. Action, not reaction, defines mental toughness. This is the critical distinction the Stoics drew between a life of purpose and a life of passive suffering. It's the difference between being the author of your own story and merely being a character buffeted by the plot twists of fate, constantly complaining about a script you feel you didn't write. The Stoics revered action, but not just any action. They championed virtuous action. This means behavior guided by wisdom, justice, courage, and moderation, undertaken not because it's easy or guaranteed to succeed, but simply because it is the right thing to do. They believed your character is not revealed by your thoughts or your intentions, but by your deeds. A soldier may feel fear, but it is his decision to hold the line that defines his bravery. In the same way, you may feel procrastination, but it is your decision to begin the task that defines your discipline. Mental toughness is the engine that converts your highest values into tangible reality, regardless of how you feel in the moment. Marcus Aurelius, who could have easily been consumed by the luxuries and intrigues of imperial court life, constantly drilled this idea into his own mind. He wrote in his private journal, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." This is the ultimate Stoic call to action. It is a dismissal of endless philosophizing and debate in favor of direct, immediate doing. He's saying that your duty is not to perfectly define virtue in the abstract, but to imperfectly enact it in the real world, right now, with the materials you have at hand. Another powerful reminder from his meditations is, you have been formed of three parts: body, breath, and mind. Of these, the first two are yours insofar as you are responsible for their care, but only the third is truly yours. Your mind is your command center, and its primary purpose is to issue orders for virtuous action to the rest of your being. To let it sit idle, or to let it merely react to external events, is to neglect your most fundamental responsibility. History provides a profound example of this principle in the actions of the Roman statesman Cato the Younger. During the fall of the Roman Republic, Cato found himself politically opposed to the rising power of Julius Caesar. He knew that Caesar's ambition threatened the very foundations of the republican system he loved. Cato could have chosen many easier paths. He could have retired from public life in protest. He could have written scathing critiques from a safe distance. He could have simply complained about the state of affairs, but Cato believed in action. He used every tool at his disposal within the Senate to block Caesar's moves. He rallied opposition, and he ultimately chose to take his own life rather than live under a dictator's rule, believing that final act would serve as a permanent symbol of resistance. While his methods can be debated, his commitment to acting on his principles, regardless of the personal cost, was a stunning embodiment of the Stoic ideal. He did not just believe in liberty, he acted for it relentlessly until his last breath. Now, let's translate this ancient imperative into the battles of your modern life. Think about your own work ethic. It's easy to complain about a boss, a frustrating project, or a perceived lack of recognition. This is passivity. It is a reaction to your circumstances. The Stoic discipline of action asks a different question. What is the virtuous thing to do despite these circumstances? Your virtue might be demonstrated by doing your work with exceptional quality, not because you'll be rewarded for it, but because doing a job well is a good in itself. It might be shown by taking the initiative on a problem everyone else is ignoring, not for the glory, but because it needs to be done. This shifts your entire focus from what is happening to you to what you can do. In your personal commitments, this discipline is equally powerful. It's easy to feel neglected in a relationship and to react with coldness or complaint. The virtuous action is to proactively express appreciation or offer help, not because the other person deserves it in that moment, but because being a loving and supportive partner is who you choose to be. Your action is not a reaction to their behavior, it is an expression of your own character. So here is your challenge, your call to action from the Stoic generals of old. Identify one single area in your life right now where you have been passive. Where have you been waiting for conditions to be perfect, for someone else to make the first move, or for your motivation to magically appear? Is it a difficult conversation you've been avoiding? A health goal you keep putting off, a creative project sitting dormant? Now make the choice to engage the discipline of action. Do not wait to feel like doing it. Your feelings are not in charge, your reasoned judgment is. Today, before the sun sets, take one purposeful, tangible step in that area. Send the email, schedule the doctor's appointment, have the honest talk, or spend 20 minutes on that project. Let the action itself be the reward. Each time you choose action over passivity, you are not just completing a task, you are casting a vote for your own agency. You are building the mental muscle that allows you to stand firm in the storm, not as a passive victim of the weather, but as an active architect of your own shelter. Gratitude isn't just positivity, it's a strategic defense against despair. This might sound like a modern self-help tip, but its roots run deep into Stoic philosophy, where it was practiced not as a simple feel-good exercise, but as a form of mental fortification. The Stoics understood that in the midst of hardship, the human mind has a natural tendency to zoom in on what's missing, what's wrong, what's been lost. This focus amplifies pain and creates a sense of helplessness. Gratitude was their tactical maneuver to break this cycle. It was the conscious, disciplined act of shifting attention from the assault to the arsenal, from what was being taken to what could never be taken away. In doing so, they built an inner bulwark that no external circumstance could ever breach. Imagine an ancient general preparing for a long siege. His first order of business wouldn't be to stare in despair at the enemy's numbers. It would be to take a full inventory of his own supplies. How much grain is in the granaries? How many arrows are in the armory? How many loyal soldiers stand on the walls? This audit doesn't change the reality of the enemy outside, but it fundamentally changes the general's mindset. It moves him from a position of fear to a position of strength, from worrying about what he lacks to strategizing with what he has. The Stoic practice of gratitude is the exact same audit, but for the resources of the soul. When everything seems to be going wrong, you don't deny the problems. You simply force yourself to also acknowledge the enduring goods. You count your inner blessings with the same rigor a general counts his sacks of grain. The Stoic philosopher Seneca, a man who faced exile, chronic illness, and the volatile politics of Nero's court, was a master of this practice. He wrote in one of his letters, "He is a great man who uses earthenware dishes as if they were silver, but he is equally great who uses silver as if it were earthenware." This is the essence of Stoic gratitude. It's not about the value of the objects you possess, but about the unshakable value you place on your own inner state. It's the ability to derive the same sense of enoughness from a simple meal as from a lavish feast, because your peace of mind is not dependent on the china plate. True gratitude for Seneca was the ultimate declaration of independence from fortune's whims. It was the recognition that your core well-being is built on virtues like wisdom and courage, which are internal and therefore invincible. We know that Stoics like Marcus Aurelius incorporated this into their daily routines. His personal journal, which we know as Meditations, is filled with passages that read like gratitude lists. He didn't just write down things he was thankful for. He actively contemplated the people and qualities he admired, expressing gratitude for the lessons he learned from even his most difficult opponents. This was a deliberate mental drill. By starting his day by reflecting on the good, the privilege of reason, the beauty of the natural world, the love of his family, he was inoculating himself against the frustrations and betrayals he knew he would likely face before the sun set. He was stocking the granaries of his mind so that when the siege of daily stress began, he had ample reserves to draw upon. This ancient practice finds its most powerful modern expression in the habit of gratitude journaling. While the Stoics did it in their minds or on scrolls, we can do it with a simple notebook. The act of physically writing down 3 to 5 specific things you are grateful for each day is not just a nice thing to do, it's a neurological recalibration. It forces your brain to scan your environment for positives, training it over time to become more adept at spotting opportunities, connections, and blessings that it would otherwise overlook. In challenging times, this practice becomes even more critical. When you're facing a professional setback, gratitude might be for the skills you're building through the struggle. During a period of ill health, it might be gratitude for the care of a loved one or simply for a moment of pain-free peace. This isn't about pretending the difficulty doesn't exist. It's about building a balanced perspective that holds both the struggle and the support, the loss and the remaining gifts in the same field of vision. So I invite you to conduct your own strategic audit right now. Think about the current challenges you might be facing, the pressure, the uncertainty, the weariness. Now, in the midst of that, I want you to identify and list 3 specific things you can be genuinely grateful for in this very moment. They don't have to be monumental. Perhaps it's the warmth of the sun through a window, the reliability of a trusted friend you can call, the comfort of a familiar routine, or even the simple fact that you possess a mind capable of learning these ancient strategies. By naming them, you are not ignoring the battle outside your walls. You are simply reminding yourself of the strength and resources you already hold within them. This act of grateful recognition is a profound declaration that while you may not control every circumstance, you always retain command over what you choose to value and honor with your attention. Great generals listened to their advisors. Stoics listened to wisdom wherever it was found. This fundamental openness to learning was not a sign of weakness in their eyes, but the very hallmark of a strong and adaptable mind. A military commander who believed he had nothing left to learn from his scouts, his junior officers, or even the mistakes of his enemies was a commander destined for a devastating and preventable defeat. The Stoics took this military principle and applied it to the entire arena of human experience. They understood that true mental agility, the ability to pivot, to grow, and to overcome new challenges, is impossible if you are sealed inside an echo chamber of your own assumptions. Your mind, like a fortress, needs gates as much as it needs walls. Gates to allow new information, new perspectives, and constructive criticism to flow in, ensuring your defenses don't become a prison that cuts you off from the very intelligence you need to survive. The philosopher Epictetus, who began his life as a slave and rose to become one of the most influential teachers of his age, placed immense value on this teachable spirit. He famously said, "It is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows." This single sentence cuts to the core of the matter. The greatest barrier to growth is not a lack of intelligence or opportunity. It is the arrogant assumption that you have already arrived, that your current understanding is complete. Epictetus is highlighting that the first step to learning anything is the humble admission that there is something you do not know. This requires actively seeking out perspectives that challenge your own and listening to feedback, even when it is difficult to hear, not as a personal attack, but as precious data that can help you correct your course and avoid future errors. For the Stoic, every person you meet and every situation you encounter becomes a potential teacher, if you only have the humility to pay attention. We can see this principle in action with brilliant clarity in the story of the Roman Emperor Hadrian. Unlike many leaders who clung stubbornly to tradition, Hadrian was renowned for his intellectual curiosity and his willingness to learn from the diverse cultures within the vast empire he ruled. He didn't just command from Rome, he spent more than half of his reign traveling the provinces, from the damp frontiers of Britain to the ancient cities of Greece and Egypt. He didn't travel as a tourist but as a student. He listened to local governors, soldiers, engineers, and philosophers. When he saw the superior design of Greek armor, he adopted it for his own troops. He learned from the advanced architectural techniques of the Egyptians and the strategic insights of the Germanic tribes. This openness to learning from anyone, regardless of their status or origin, allowed him to become one of Rome's most effective and innovative rulers. He strengthened the empire not by imposing his will from the top down, but by synthesizing the best ideas from the bottom up, proving that a leader's strength is multiplied by their willingness to listen. Now, let's bring this ancient wisdom into the modern workplace, an environment often riddled with fragile egos and defensive postures. Imagine a team working on a crucial project. The project manager has devised a plan they believe is flawless. A junior member of the team, however, spots a potential flaw in the logistics, a risk the manager overlooked. The defensive, unteachable reaction would be to dismiss the feedback, to see it as a challenge to authority, and to plow ahead with the original plan. The Stoic, teachable reaction is radically different. The manager would actively thank the junior member for their insight, genuinely consider the merit of the concern, and be willing to adapt the plan accordingly. This isn't about who is right, it's about what is right for the project. By creating an environment where feedback is sought and valued, the manager isn't diminishing their authority. They are enhancing the collective intelligence of the entire team, building a culture of shared ownership and resilience where everyone feels empowered to contribute to the mission's success. Your opportunity for growth this week lies in a simple but powerful exercise in Stoic listening. I want you to identify one specific source of feedback you can actively seek out and learn from. This isn't about waiting for your annual performance review, it's about proactively engaging. It could be asking a trusted colleague one specific question. What is one thing I could do to be a better collaborator on our team? It might be sitting down with your partner and asking, how can I be a better listener in our relationship? Perhaps it's finally reading through those critical comments on a project you completed, not to defend yourself, but to mine them for one single nugget. Truth you can use to improve next time. The source of the feedback is less important than your intention in receiving it. Go into this conversation not to explain or justify, but with the sole purpose of understanding. Your goal is to harvest one piece of actionable data that will make you slightly wiser, slightly more effective, and significantly more mentally agile. In that act of humble seeking, you are not weakening your citadel, you are reinforcing it with the strongest material available, the hard-earned wisdom of others. The gap between impulse and action is where mental toughness is built. That tiny sliver of time, often no more than a heartbeat, is the difference between a response you'll regret and one you can be proud of. Ancient generals understood this space as their most critical battlefield, not the one with clashing armies, but the internal one where instinct and reason fought for control. A commander who reacted to a provocation or a piece of false intelligence without that crucial pause could lead thousands of men to their deaths for no reason. The Stoics took this military necessity and turned it into a daily psychological practice, a way to build an inner guardrail that would prevent their emotions from steering their lives off a cliff. They called this discipline prosauche, or attention, a constant, vigilant awareness of your inner state that allows you to intercept a raw impulse before it becomes a destructive action. The Roman philosopher Seneca, who served as an advisor to the volatile Emperor Nero and knew all about the dangers of a rash word or deed, wrote powerfully about the cost of losing this control. He warned the greatest remedy for anger is delay. This simple advice is a masterclass in strategic psychology. Seneca isn't saying you should never feel anger. He's saying you must never act on it immediately. By instructing us to delay, he is prescribing a cooling-off period for the white-hot emotions that cloud our judgment. He advises us to give our initial, furious reaction time to settle, like muddy water, so that the clear, calm waters of our reasoned mind can once again become visible. That delay is the space where you reclaim your power. It's the moment you transition from being a puppet jerked around by your emotions to becoming the puppeteer, deliberately choosing which strings to pull. We can see the catastrophic cost of ignored impulse control in history, and conversely, the glorious rewards of practiced restraint. Consider the fate of the legendary Carthaginian general Hannibal. After his stunning victory at the Battle of Cannae, where he effectively destroyed the Roman army, his officers urged him to march on Rome itself. The city was defenseless, ripe for the taking. The impulse, the raw emotional urge for a final, decisive victory, must have been overwhelming, but Hannibal paused. He chose restraint. He calculated that his army, though victorious, was exhausted and too small for a prolonged siege of such a fortified city. His decision to not attack is one of the most debated in military history. While some see it as his greatest mistake, others see it as a rational calculation, a masterful demonstration of impulse control that prevented a potential disaster. In contrast, the Roman Emperor Caligula, notorious for his lack of restraint, would often act on violent whims and paranoid impulses, ordering executions on a mere fancy. His failure to control his impulses didn't just lead to bad decisions. It eroded the loyalty of everyone around him and ultimately contributed to his assassination. The lesson is clear: the leader who cannot command themselves will never be able to command the respect of others for long. Now, translate this ancient battlefield into the conflicts of your own modern life. Your enemy isn't a rival army. It's that email that makes your blood boil, the careless comment from a relative that triggers you, or the tempting distraction that pulls you away from your most important work. These are your moments of provocation. The Stoic strategy is to insert a deliberate 3-second pause between the trigger and your response. In that space, you are not an employee reacting to a frustrating boss. You are a strategist assessing a communication. You are not a partner reacting to a perceived slight. You are a diplomat choosing the path to de-escalation. You are not a dieter staring at a plate of cookies. You are a commander reminding your troops of the long-term mission. This pause is where you activate your higher reasoning and ask the Stoic questions. Is this within my control? Will this action align with my values? What would the consequences of my first impulse be? Your challenge is to make this practice real, starting with your very next interaction. The next time you feel that familiar surge of emotion, whether it's anger, defensiveness, anxiety, or craving, I want you to literally count to 3 in your mind. 1, 2, 3. In that brief window, take one deep breath. This is not passive. It is an incredibly active and disciplined act of self-defense. You are defending your peace of mind, your relationships, and your integrity from the hijacking of a temporary emotion. In that pause, you are building the mental toughness of a general, proving to yourself that you are not a slave to your impulses, but a master of your actions. Even the lone general relied on allies, so do we need our community for mental resilience. This image of the solitary Stoic, perfectly self-sufficient and detached from the world, is one of the biggest misconceptions about this ancient philosophy. The truth is, Stoicism was never meant to be practiced in a vacuum. While they fiercely cultivated inner strength, the great Stoic thinkers understood that human beings are fundamentally social creatures, designed for connection and mutual support. They saw a profound difference between unhealthy dependency, relying on others for your validation or happiness, and the strategic interdependence of a well-fortified community. A general might command the army, but he relies on his officers for intelligence, his soldiers for execution, and his blacksmiths to keep the weapons sharp. In the same way, your inner citadel is strongest not when it's isolated, but when it's part of a network of allied forts, each providing support, perspective, and reinforcement against the sieges of life. Marcus Aurelius, despite the immense isolation of his power, constantly reminded himself of this deep connection to others. He wrote in his Meditations, "What brings no benefit to the hive brings none to the bee." This simple, beautiful metaphor captures the Stoic view of community perfectly. The bee is a formidable creature on its own, but its true purpose and strength are realized only within the context of the hive. Your individual journey toward mental toughness is not a lonely trek into the wilderness. It is your unique contribution to the collective strength of your own hive, your family, your friends, your colleagues. Your resilience doesn't just benefit you, it makes you a more stable, more capable, and more compassionate member of your community, which in turn strengthens the entire network. This sense of common humanity, of being part of a larger whole, is a powerful antidote to the feelings of isolation and overwhelm that so often accompany modern life. We have direct historical evidence of Stoics actively building and participating in these circles of support. The most famous example is the extensive correspondence between Seneca and his friend Lucilius. These weren't just philosophical essays sent into the void, they were personal letters between two men committed to practicing Stoicism together. Seneca was the older, more experienced mentor, and Lucilius was the eager student, but their relationship was a two-way street. Seneca shared his wisdom, but he also gained clarity and purpose by articulating his thoughts for his friend. They held each other accountable, challenged each other's assumptions, and provided a safe space to discuss fears and failures without judgment. This was a mastermind group for the mind and soul, a dedicated alliance for mutual growth. Beyond individual pairs, Stoicism was taught in schools, discussed in public lectures, and formed the basis for intellectual communities throughout the ancient world. They knew that surrounding yourself with people who share your commitment to virtue and reason creates an environment where those qualities can flourish. This ancient principle translates with incredible power to our modern search for mental strength. Your support network is your personal Stoic circle. This doesn't mean you need to find friends who can quote Marcus Aurelius. It means consciously cultivating relationships with people who strengthen your resolve rather than deplete it. A mentor, whether formal or informal, acts as your Seneca, someone a few steps ahead on the path who can offer guidance and perspective when your own view is clouded by the fog of battle. A trusted friend or partner can be your Lucilius, someone to walk alongside you, to listen without judgment when you need to vent, and to gently remind you of your own principles when you start to stray from them. Even online communities centered around shared interests in personal development or philosophy can serve as a digital agora, a marketplace of ideas where you can find encouragement, new strategies, and the reassuring knowledge that you are not alone in your struggles. Think about your own life for a moment. Who are the people that leave you feeling emotionally drained and anxious after you spend time with them? These are the relationships that, like a poorly defended section of your wall, require constant energy to maintain and leave you vulnerable. Now bring to mind the people who leave you feeling uplifted, grounded, and stronger. the ones you can be your authentic self around without pretense or performance. These individuals are your allies. They are the guardians of your inner citadel. Your reflective prompt and your mission is to consciously reach out to one of these people this week. Don't wait for a crisis. Send a message, make a call, or arrange to meet. Tell them you appreciate their presence in your life. Share something you're struggling with and ask for their perspective. In doing so, you are not showing weakness. You are engaging in the ancient, strategic practice of fortifying your position through alliance. You are acknowledging that the path to unshakable mental strength is not walked alone, but in the good company of those who help you remember who you are and what you are capable of becoming. What makes a life truly resilient? It is not a life of ease or comfort, but a life of purpose. This is the final and most profound lesson the Stoic generals teach us about mental toughness. They understood that an unshakable mind is not built on techniques alone, but is the natural result of a character aligned with virtue and a life dedicated to a cause greater than oneself. A soldier fighting for a paycheck might flee when the battle turns, but a soldier fighting for his homeland, for his family, for a principle he holds sacred, will find reserves of courage he never knew he possessed. His purpose becomes his armor and his spear. The Stoics argued that the same is true for every one of us in the battles of daily life. Your deepest strength is not found in merely enduring hardship, but in knowing precisely what you are enduring for. The philosopher Epictetus, who dedicated his life to teaching this very idea, put it with stunning clarity: virtue is the highest good, and it is sufficient for happiness. At first glance, this might sound abstract, but for a Stoic, virtue was anything but theoretical. It was the ultimate practical tool. Virtue meant living with excellence of character, demonstrating wisdom, courage, justice, and self-discipline in every action, no matter how small. Epictetus is telling us that when you make the cultivation of your character your primary purpose, you achieve a form of happiness and resilience that is completely untouchable by external events. Your self-worth is no longer tied to your job title, your social status, or your bank account. It is tied to the integrity of your actions. This internal scorecard is what allows you to stand firm when the world tries to knock you down. If you know in your soul that you acted with courage and honesty, then even a failed outcome cannot truly defeat you. History provides us with countless examples of this principle in action, where a clear purpose fueled seemingly superhuman resilience. Consider the resolve of someone like Nelson Mandela. Imprisoned for 27 years under brutal conditions, he could have succumbed to bitterness or despair. Instead, his unwavering commitment to the purpose of justice and reconciliation for his people provided a psychological fortress that his jailers could not penetrate. His purpose gave meaning to his suffering, transforming his prison cell from a place of punishment into a stage for his greatest act of moral leadership. He was a Stoic general in all but name, understanding that his most powerful weapon was not a gun, but an unbreakable will fueled by a virtuous cause. Closer to the Stoic world, we have figures like Cato the Younger, who chose to take his own life rather than live under the dictatorship of Julius Caesar, a man he believed represented the death of the Roman Republic. For Cato, his purpose, liberty, and republican virtue was literally worth dying for. His final act was not one of defeat, but the ultimate demonstration of a life lived in accordance with its highest principles. This ancient wisdom translates directly into our modern search for meaning and mental strength. For many today, a sense of purpose is found in meaningful work. It's the difference between viewing your job as a series of tasks to be completed for a paycheck and seeing it as a platform for expressing your values. A teacher's purpose isn't just to administer tests, it's to nurture curiosity and empower young minds. An engineer's purpose isn't just to write code, it's to build solutions that make people's lives easier. When you connect your daily efforts to a larger purpose, the inevitable frustrations, the difficult client, the stubborn bug, the bureaucratic hurdle become mere obstacles on a meaningful path, not reasons to quit. Your purpose becomes the lens through which you view challenge, filtering out petty annoyances and clarifying what truly matters. But purpose extends far beyond your career. It can be found in your role as a parent dedicated to raising kind and resilient children. It can be your purpose as a community member, volunteering your time to support those in need. It can be a creative purpose to bring beauty into the world through art or music. It can even be the simple, profound purpose of being a good friend, a reliable neighbor, a person of your word. A virtuous purpose is your personal cause. It is the standard you raise for yourself, and it is what will unite your scattered energies into a focused force. When you are clear on your purpose, decision-making becomes simpler. You can ask yourself in any situation, does this action align with my deepest values? Does this move me closer to the person I aim to become? This is how you build a resilient life, not by avoiding storms, but by having a sturdy ship and a fixed star to navigate by. Now, I want you to make this personal. This isn't about grand, world-changing ambitions unless that is your calling. This is about identifying the core virtues that you want to define your character. Look within and ask yourself, what is one virtue I feel is most essential for me to strengthen right now? Is it the courage to speak up more often, the self-discipline to master a skill or a habit, the justice to be a fairer and more compassionate listener, the wisdom to make better decisions with my time and energy? Choose just one, give it a name. This virtue is now your immediate purpose, your personal standard to carry into the skirmishes of your day. Your mission is to look for one small opportunity today to enact it. That is how you begin to forge a resilience that is not just about bouncing back, but about moving forward with unwavering clarity and strength. And so we arrive back at the beginning, not as the same person who started this journey, but as someone newly equipped with the forgotten war strategies of ancient thinkers. We've traveled from the general's mindset, fortifying our inner citadel, through the premeditation of evils to disarm anxiety, and learned to align our desires only with what we can truly command. We've practiced the warrior's equanimity to find calm in chaos, discovered how to turn every obstacle into an advantage, and mastered the strategic clarity that comes from healthy detachment. We've drilled in daily mental preparation, embraced voluntary discomfort to become stronger, and learned to focus our precious energy solely on the controllables. We've reflected on our mortality to clarify what matters, built resilience through consistent habits, and even learned to love our fate, embracing every part of our story as essential. Through self-examination, patience, and the wisdom of the strategic retreat, we've cultivated a flexibility that allows us to bend without breaking. We've found strength in solitude and perspective, committed to purposeful action over passive complaint, and built our defenses with gratitude. We've listened and learned from others, mastered the pause between impulse and action, and recognized that our community is our greatest ally. And through it all, we've seen that every technique, every drill, every strategy is ultimately in service of one thing: living a life of profound purpose and virtue. These are not mere historical curiosities. They are a living, breathing operating system for the modern mind, designed for the battles we face today: the overwhelm, the uncertainty, the constant pressure. Marcus Aurelius, who embodied these principles amidst the literal chaos of war and plague, left us with a timeless reminder that echoes across the centuries. Look well into thyself. There is a source of strength which will always spring up if thou wilt always look. That source of strength is what we've been uncovering. It is not something you need to acquire from outside yourself. It is a wellspring within you, waiting to be tapped through consistent practice and unwavering intent. Your journey to unshakable mental fortitude doesn't require you to master all of this at once. That would be like a recruit trying to command an army on their first day. The Stoic way is always to start small. Choose just one practice from our discussion that resonated most deeply with you. Perhaps it's the evening journal review to audit your day, or the 3-second pause before you react to a trigger. Maybe it's the daily practice of gratitude or the conscious release of something outside your control. Weave that single thread into the fabric of your daily life. Practice it with diligence for a week, then another. Observe the subtle but powerful shift it creates in your resilience, your clarity, and your peace. That one small victory will build the confidence to adopt another, and then another, until these strategies cease to be techniques you practice and simply become who you are, a person of immense inner strength. I would love to hear which of these ancient strategies you're most excited to bring into your own life. Share your chosen practice or your biggest takeaway in the comments below. Let's build a community of modern Stoics supporting one another. And if you found this exploration valuable, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell for more content like this, as we continue to mine the wisdom of the ages to build better, tougher, more purposeful lives in the present.